In this video, I'm gonna introduce you to brush tools and brush sets in order to use them for the digital painting. So what I recommend you that to have a pressure sensitive tablets if you can purchase it or if you already have it. These are really helpful digital tablets that help you to work with brushes like a pencil or pen. Then it is pressure sensitive. If you press it harder, then your paint or your color will be stronger. It will affect the hardness, strongness of your brush. If you don't have it, you can still work with brushes with the mouse, but it's not as convenient as having the pressure sensitive tablets. So I created a new document in order to have access to the brush tool. The short key is B. You can press B or you can choose it from toolbar. As you can see here, I chose it. And keep in mind that this tool has a subcategory. So if you right click on the tool, you can see the brush tool and a few other tools. In this week, I will cover brush tool, color replacement tool, and mixer brush tool. But before I start with the brush tool, I want to tell you that there is also a set of other helpful tools that you can use it in order to work on the digital painting in Photoshop. So for example, like here, there is another set of tools like blur tool, sharpen tool, or a smudge tool. These are really helpful tools that I recommend you to take a look and see how they work. It's really easy. Another category is the dodge tool, burn tool, and sponge tool. So basically these tools manipulate the pixel in your image or your document, and it helps you to achieve different interesting results. For example, one way is that if you want to use the dodge tool, or if you want to even use the low opacity of eraser tool, basically you remove the pixels from your image and you can use it sometimes for adding highlights to your image. So let's go back to the brush tool. If I press B, and I started with the basic brush tool. First thing, you can change the size of your brush by pressing continuously the right angle and left angle bracket on your keyboard. So if I do the right angle bracket, basically I can make the brush bigger, and if I do the left angle, I can make the brush smaller. Another way to control the size of your brush is to hold the Alt and Control key. So if you're a Mac user, don't be confused. Don't use the Command key, just use the Control. So if you hold the Alt and Control together, and if you start dragging your mouse to the right or to the left, you can change the size of your brush. So make sure that you hold Alt, Control, and horizontally move your mouse. Also, if you again hold Control and Alt, and if you move your mouse this time vertically up and down, you can change the hardness and softness of your brush. So these are really helpful short keys and commands that you can use when you're working with brush. So if you want to choose the color, definitely you have to choose it from the foreground and background toggle in the toolbar. You can double click on that one and like choose the color of your brush. Like any color you choose, it's gonna affect the color of your brush. There are two important panels that you need to know when you're working with brushes. One is the brush panel that you can have access from the brush menu, tool menu, or you can go to the window and you can see the brush and the brush settings. So you can have access to the brush setting and brush from the window, or you can easily click on the toggles in the tools menu bar. So if you click on this icon, it brings up the brush panel for you, and if you click on the right toggle, it brings the brush setting panel for you. Basically, brush panel is the one that you choose different brushes and different brush strokes, and the brush setting let you to modify the setting of your brush. And I will leave these two for you to work with them and get comfortable with them. Basically, you can still like work with the hardness in the brush setting, and this is like the same short cut or command that I told you. You can modify the hardness of your brush here, or you can hold Alt Control and drag your mouse vertically. You can also change the spacing of the spacing size of your brush, but keep in your mind, if you reduce the spacing, it makes your brush smoother, but it will affect the speed of processing on your computer. So I want you to know, if you want to know like what spacing is, consider brush creates separate strokes for you, or separate dots. So if you, for example, I increase the spacing, and now if I start dragging with my mouse, you see like every time, even when I drag, I get like one dot or one stroke because the spacing is so high. If I reduce the spacing, right now it even gives me a preview, and you can see by dragging how these dots basically are connected and like creates like one continuous line or brush a stroke for you until you release your mouse or your pen. So, and if I go to the brushes, you can have like access to the basic brushes, but also you can you can click on this small toggle on the top right, and you can choose get more brushes, and it will navigate you to Adobe web page with like more brush packages. So you can click on them, download the package that you want, and then you double click on the downloaded file and you open it with the Photoshop, and it will be automatically added to the brush set that you have. For example, here the mega pack is the one that I downloaded from here, from this website. Also, you can get different brushes from other websites and like import it to your Photoshop. You don't have to just consider Adobe brushes. Another thing that you need to know is these options in the menu bar. So the mode is basically the way, it's like blending mode that we talked about it before. Basically, it's the way that your brush interacts with the underneath layers or like underneath brush strokes. For example, if I have, by default it is normal, and I recommend you to keep it normal unless you want to do something different. For example, if I change the normal to multiply, and if I add another stroke on top of this one, you can see like the intersection of two strokes has a darker color because I changed the mode to multiply. So let's make it normal again. Opacity, you definitely know what opacity is. But what I want to tell you, when you're working with brushes and when you do your digital painting, I recommend you to work more with flow instead of opacity. Opacity is basically when you choose, for example, 50%, it's 48% right now. So if I draw Like with my brush, if I create a stroke and if I don't release the mouse, you always see like this is the opacity that I get. So every time if I add another stroke on the one that I already have, I add again 48% of the opacity. So the difference is that right now you can see I add and I can see the intersection between strokes are very obvious and it is not as smooth as I want. So instead of that one, if I have the opacity 100% and if I work with flow, so right now, see, the flow is 100%. Right now I have a very dry brush. Let's change my brush to something like the soft round. And now, if you see, for example, if I have the flow of 100% and start drawing, and if I decrease the flow, you can see how smoothly it builds up the color without seeing that line. It's like a gradient. It works like a gradient for me. Definitely blends the color for me much better than working just with the opacity. So I recommend you when you're working with brushes, instead of changing the opacity in order to build up the color smoothly, do it with the flow. And as you decrease the value of the flow, it means like it's gonna be smoother with something like less opacity and less pressure, and like you will see like the smooth transition between like the full color, full flow color and a very small amount of flow.